Now on this video, I'm going to try to show how I repaired a Honda NS250R fairing that had been damaged using cyanoacrylate, carbon fiber, the matching paint, and an IWATA airbrush. This is a very, very detailed video. I tried very hard not to leave out any steps because this is a very common thing in motorcycling, that people would want to fix a big paint chip or a chunk or a crack. And I think all the information on this video, because most of it is in real time, there'd be enough of a chance you'd be able to do it yourself after watching the video. Now, today's project, this is something that's really, really important to understand. This is a bike that was not available in the United States, so parts are, for all purposes, unavailable. This belonged to Mark, and he wanted to do a little touch-up on the fairing, some bodywork damage, and this is a very easy job to do with the proper material using CA and sanding blocks. And so when he brought the part to the shop, there's always the first thing I like to do before I even start to handle a part, and definitely before you sand it. You want to check out where the bad areas are. And in this case, what I want to do, I want to do a thorough cleaning and even steam cleaning of the part. Because this is a part that, again, if you could just go down to the Honda dealer and just order one of these for a couple $100, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And what happens when you buy some of these antique parts from overseas, or usually you have to buy these from Japan or some other country that this bike was imported into, what happens is they're in worse shape than the ones you have. So it's always good to know how to restore it and bring it back to life, and that's what we're going to try to show on this video, is get rid of some of the crash damage. There is some crash damage, but it's always important to understand. The most important thing, and when I try to help people develop some painting skills, whether it's in my shop or through the video, is get the part clean, immaculately clean. Wear gloves, clean gloves. Try to work on a clean towel. In this case, we're working on an old bath towel. But not to take this part onto a table where it's beaten itself to death. A padded table is a good way to do this. And it's real important if you do have a helper. Now, in this case, I didn't have a helper, but if you do have a helper, it really makes a big difference. In the meantime, any grit, any dirt, any residual fingerprints, anything on this, they're going to ultimately wind up into the area that we're going to try to touch up. So that's the first part of anything, is get the part immaculately clean. That is so important, and so many people kind of gloss over that and skip over it. But it really makes the difference between when you're done with this, not having one of those little fish eyes right in the middle of the whole job, or some place that you're sorry you didn't do a little better job. Now, in this case, holding a part up with paper towels is taking the place of having a helper. But anything you can do, sometimes you can use paper towels, or I've used boxes or anything to get the part stable. Now, I know we have several little parts on this that need to be touched up, but the overall philosophy here is, and it's really important to understand this, I don't want to repaint the whole part, because we would have to take the stickers off, and they're unavailable, or make new decals. And in this case, Mark did make some new decals. But if we can salvage the old decals, this is so important, and it'll save a lot of hours and a lot of money and a lot of time. So because I was really trying to salvage this part from well, I don't know how many hours we put into the cleaning and the prepping and but it was a lot. And I even thought, well, you know, as a final thing, I'll steam clean it, and then I know I'm hopefully dealing with a really nice clean part, and I can get these touch-up areas as nice and neat as I possibly can. You can see that area where usually that's the high point when you drop a bike. There's one down lower than that. But again, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to repaint the whole fairing. And that's the whole point. Actually, the whole point of this video is to try to show how you can do that and make it relatively easy, instead of taking all those decals off, sanding it down, priming it, painting it white. And because Mark has the exact touch-up paint for this, and that was a tricky thing to do, is to get the touch-up paint. That's exact white. You think white would be an easy color to touch up? It's not. It can be a real challenge to get it to be perfect. But I just keep going back and forth. I know I get redundant and people complain the videos are too long, but it doesn't matter. This is the crux of everything, is to get the part clean. That is so important. Once you have that, now you can look at, because now you're not going to grind any residual oil or grease or road grime or anything in. There's a giant paint chip. Now, the easiest way I know how to fix this, and it's a way that I've shown many times on a video, but I'm not sure how many other people have shown this on video. I know other people do this. In the world of modeling, you use CA all the time to fix things like this. But this is a composite part. The paint came off in a big chunk, and so sanding that smooth is going to be a real challenge. It's going to be more challenging than you think it is. I'm going to take some 400 sandpaper, and I'm going to start at that corner and do that corner first. That will be the big one. And try to get that to be that I can blend it in, and it'll be as smooth as possible. And hopefully I can touch that one little area up and make it that Mark is happy with it, and we don't have to then repaint the whole fairing and redo all the stickers and decals and everything. It'll be a real time saving if I can make this happen. Now, you never really know if this is going to happen exactly the way you want until you start sanding it, because a lot of times you can't get the shape just right, and you do have to use a little bit of filler, or in my case I like to use CA. But the first step is always to give it the old American try. Try to get that, and a sanding block is critical. If you just sand this with your bare hand, all you're going to wind up is put waves in it. The block helps you maintain the shape. And in this case, if we go a little bit too far, we're going to seal it with CA or with epoxy. It doesn't really matter. But the CA is the most convenient, easy way to do this. Once that's block sanded down, and block sanding it down is very time consuming. This does not go in 5 minutes and you're done. I only show the highlights of this on a video so that the videos don't get cumbersome or too long. This takes time. Now, I can imagine how many people with sport bikes have a chunk missing like that and would really love to repair it without having to buy that fairing part. Even if you could buy it, you're looking at hundreds of dollars. And then you always have the problem that when you buy things off eBay, they might be in worse shape. Again, it's a real problem with dealing with older bikes. This is an old bike, and again, parts are for all purposes unobtainable for this bike. So I will spend the extra time to get that sanded down to where it's really, you can run your finger over it and you can't feel it. Just run your finger over that. And it helps if you have a rubber glove on, by the way. That's a good trick. John Pothia taught me years ago. When you're doing this kind of blend, I call it a blend. Now, right now, what we have to deal with is paint edges. If I were to just go paint that, even with primer, there's a chance those paint edges, where the paint gets one molecule thick, they start to curl up. And you'll always see that in the final finish. Well, the way to avoid that, and this is the trick of tricks, this is the one that it's worth watching a whole video for. Seal that whole area. A couple of drops of thin Brodex CA, and just, now don't stop. Don't stop with the paper towel right in the middle of it, or the paper towel will stick to where it is. You need a couple of coats. Now when I blend that, there'll be just enough CA to hold that little edge down. Now I can do it without a sanding block and just blend this in. So that in itself is one of the really good tips for doing this kind of a repair. And this kind of a repair is something, even if you have the time and inclination and money to buy new parts, this you can do this in one day and have the bike back running, where sometimes you have to order parts and who knows when you're going to get them, or if they're going to be in good shape. So it really is an advantage to be able to repair your own parts and take care of little chips and cracks and things like this. That is such a good tip. Now this is the magic. When you put that CA on, and a lot of people that use Bondo and filler, and yeah, maybe they poo-poo my way of doing it, But this way has worked for me for many, many years. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've fixed so many motorcycles. It's hard to even say how many there are. And every one of them, what's nice here is they stand the test of time. Now this is Zap. That's another kind of CA, but it's thicker. This is thick CA. CA comes in thin, medium, and thick. I like to use some of each from time to time, and it really isn't critical what brand it is as long as it's CA. Cyanoacrylate is the right name. You can order it from the internet. I like to get mine from Brodak because it's fresh. He's a big distributor and he always has fresh stuff. And CA has a shelf life. If you keep it in the fridge, you'll extend the shelf life. And that's dependent on how old it is when you get it. So if you buy it from a place, it's been sitting on a shelf for 6 months, it's always good to get it from a fresh distributor. Now, you can see the paint edges. I've sealed them all in. They're sealed with CA, and now I just want to do the final blend around the corner, around the edges. I don't want to have any sharp edges. I can close my eyes or do this in the dark because I can feel it a lot easier than I can see it. Feeling it is a lot easier than seeing it. Your eye plays tricks on you, especially if you're not working under fluorescent lights. Now, we got another one that's ready here. I'm going to basically do the same thing. One down here. And then what I'm going to try to do is do these, I'll call them sanding and smoothing out, sealing it with CA, and then try to touch it up with white paint and put extra white paint on it so that that blend will be as close as possible, and I'll be able to buff it in right at the very end. And it's a little tricky to do that. At the very end, we're going to have to be real careful about buffing this in, because if there's any high spots right now, they're going to come through in the final product. So right now, to get that as smooth as possible, very, very critical, and be very fussy. Even if it's a little wrong, you can go back and sand it again, put some more CA, sand it again, put some more CA. It won't really matter. You're going to build up a smooth surface that you can't feel where that paint edges with your bare hand. And once you do that, you got a real good chance of doing the final touch-up that it's going to be perfect in the end. And you will not even be able to feel it when you're done. The worst part to have a touch-up like this is on an edge. And you can see this is probably part of the damage. This bike obviously tipped over or crashed at some point in time. And I would expect it was a low speed or fell over in a parking lot, because this kind of damage when you're going at speed usually is a lot worse. This was a relatively easy touch-up. It didn't consume a big percentage of the overall part. And I know if we were doing a total crash where there was big cracks and pieces missing, this would have been a multiple day job. As it turned out, this was just a couple of days to bring this back to life. And when this job was done, even I was surprised how good it came out. I always think when you bring this out and you put the bike back together, and then you forget which side the crash damage is on, like on Dale's RZ, you then think, well, that was a pretty good job. But this, again, is a technique that I've used, and I've been painting professionally and for fun for many, more than 60 years. Now, a lot of guys aren't even 60 years old yet, so I might have been painting things when you weren't even born. But I've learned some basic little tricks from modeling, and this CA trick is such a good trick. This works. I have shown this to so many people. Mark, for instance, and he's been able to go do CA repairs. It's magic. It really is a good product. Now, some of the other things, if you're new to CA, you want to wear gloves. It'll glue your fingers together. And you want to never drip it and have a big run, because you're going to have to sand it out. It only takes seconds to dry, unlike Bondo, where it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes depending on the temperature. So what happens, a repair like this, instead of taking some inordinately long time, the repair itself goes a lot quicker. And it's a lot, in my case, it's a lot more interesting to work and know that I can move right along than have to take big giant gaps so things dry. But again, the trick is a sanding block, and I know I keep going on and on about this, but it's an easy thing, but every step of the way you can't leave a step out. If you just leave the sanding block out of this, it's not going to come out as good. If you try sanding that by hand, if you don't get it smooth at this point, if you think you're going to get it smooth once you put the white paint on, you're going to run into big disappointment. If you follow the way this goes, and that's why some of these videos get a little long. Sometimes I repeat things over and over, but it's okay to do that if at the end of this you can do this repair yourself, and then you obviously at some point in time you can show somebody else in your group of friends how to do it. This is really good stuff to know. This is just like it's good to know if you have a motorcycle, it's good to know how to change the oil and how to replace the tires and replace a chain, basic maintenance. This is one of the skills everybody should know if you own a motorcycle. Because what it does too, a lot of people, this is really a sad thing too, a lot of people would have a bike and they put a scratch or a dent or something and they leave it like that. I've seen so many people, and because they don't want to take a day like today and just make it better than new, make it the same as new. And then you get the second chip in the paint, and then the third one, and then something rusts and you don't polish it, and all of a sudden it's not a new bike anymore. So I like to keep up with the maintenance, keep up with all of the things like this that in the end contribute to, when you're done with this, your part is as good or better than a new part that came from Honda. It's just a simple philosophy of mine, and it seems to work pretty well for me and for my little bike collection. It works incredibly well. So I am just so happy that I can show this. Now there's a crack here. Here's another thing. The crack right by the scoop. If you don't reinforce that from the back, not the part you see, I'll put a little material in there, carbon fiber, e-glass, it won't really matter. That's not a stress riser there. Put the CA in from both sides, sand it smooth, and then once it's reinforced, the odds are good it's not going to crack again. If you just repaint that with the crack there, sand it and paint it without reinforcing it, the odds are good you're going to have to do it over again. But this CA is just such a good product to use for this kind of a repair. And it's worked on so many bikes, so many times. I can't even remember how many times. It's always, when I'm done with a job like this, I'm always thinking, boy, we've brought another part back to life that otherwise might, sadly wind up in a dumpster or something like that. And this could have been brought back to life, I'm guessing, in one day of work and maybe a few dollars in material. And the good news is it's back on your bike the next day. Unlike when you're waiting in the mail for something to come from Japan, and who knows then if it even gets there in this day and age. Anyway, reinforcing the part, that's a whole nother step. Now, to any carbon fiber, and this is tow, and it doesn't really matter if it's e-glass. This is not a super high stress area. I just put a little bit of carbon tow in there. Tow, by the way, has all the strands running in one direction. A little Q-tip to just push it down. You don't want to push it down with your hand or you'll glue your hand to the part. And you can put 2, 3, 4 layers on that. If you want to make it real pretty, at the end, sand it with some 400 and put a light coat of 5-minute epoxy over it. And then you can make it just blend in it. You'll never even see it. In this case, it's on the inside of the part, on the lower edge. You're not even going to see it. But I don't want to see a crack in the paint. That's my whole objective here. I do not want to see a crack in the paint. And what happens when I'm done with this part, I'd like it to go back on a motorcycle, and nobody will even know we repaired it. It'll look relatively brand new, or almost brand new, or better than brand new if we're lucky. But again, the whole idea is we're able to do this in a way that makes sense to me. And the part when we're done is actually a little bit better because it's reinforced in some spots. And anytime you get, just another tip, anytime you have to sand through, like for a touch-up, and it gets real thin, just reinforce it from the back. Put a little bit of carbon fiber on the back. Now, this was some special paint that he had for this 250. And I remember that, of course, we had done right at this point in time, we had done his 600, and that was pearl white. So this was another special paint. And now, in a case like this, there's a lot of choices. You can airbrush it. You can use a small spray gun. In this case, I used an IWATA airbrush. But what I want to do here is I want to put on a lot of paint, but in very thin coats. I don't want to have a run, a drip, a drool. I want to put a coat on. I've back masked off all the areas I don't want to get paint on. And an airbrush doesn't tip. Do you see how nice that just went on? Now, this is just making it a little bit easier. We're trying to make this as easy and painless as possible. And again, with a result that's make the part as good or better than new. And I know because I've seen the bike after this repair was done, you'd never even know which side it's on. And that really worked out great. So for any of these, an airbrush is a great choice. Another thing, you don't have to re-back mask the whole part. All of the damage was on the side the bike fell on. So this really worked out to be a lot easier, a whole lot easier than if we had if we had to paint that whole part white again and get all the stickers and decals and everything. So when this job was done, it was one of the things that just made me really, really happy. I was able to accomplish this and accomplish it in one day. And I don't even think it took the whole day. I think this did probably realistically 3-4 hours, and that was it. And again, because we had to touch up paint. And if you're ever painting a motorcycle, you're going to paint the whole motorcycle, always save some touch-up paint. Boy, if that isn't the best tip in the world, no matter what bike you're painting, it's always good to have touch-up paint. That's for sure. So at the end of this little touch-up, I was real happy the way that part came out. And of course, it dries in the garage overnight. Mark can pick it up the next day, start putting the bike back together. This was really, really, I think it's an excellent way to do a touch-up. I hope you did enjoy the video and this little, even though it may have gone on a little bit, I think I've been able to pass on all the information you need to do this touch-up yourself. This is a good time to celebrate our good fortune, get out on the open road. And thanks so much for watching.